Welcome back. Well, it's time for the weekly highlight package with our always entertaining journalists who have a lot on their minds. Columnist Susan Delacour, bureau chief for the Toronto Star. Jolene Bellavance is bureau chief for La Presse. But you don't think Scheer's onto something when he says, you know, two women who had high-powered reputations sort of speak truth to Justin Trudeau, and the response is, even if they were speaking the real truth on this whole DPA and all that, you're gone. Like,
I think if they were men, they would have been gone 7 weeks ago.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that one. It has nothing to do with gender. It's a policy differences.
She just said it does have something to do with
a little
gender.
bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Get your lines straight, you two.
Yeah, we didn't rehearse this part.
The result would have been the same. That's what I mean. They would have been kicked out if they were men or women, and it's a question of differences on policy approach to SNC-Lavalin. It's not because it happens to be that two women were there that they had different arguments on the file. It's because it's a policy difference. That's the bottom of the affair, I would say.
And let's remember, the men who got kicked out of this story first were men, right? Like the people there.
Scott
it was
Andrews
no, Gerald Butts and Michael Wernick are gone, right? The first,
Wernick's still over there.
Yes, but
Until the 19th.
The first people to exit the Prime Minister's circle in all of this were the men involved in the story, not the women. So.
You write, Justin Trudeau, Jody Wilson-Raybould wrote the book on how to get fired. I'm curious, did Trudeau write the book on how not to deal with these internal crises?
I think if you ask anybody around town, they'll say yes. That's been sort of the story for the last 2 months, is any other prime minister would have shut this down. Yeah. I think he kind of alluded to the fact yesterday that he's glad he didn't handle this like any other prime minister. He wanted to handle it differently. I guess the success of it has to be judged by, is it going to be judged in October? Is it going to be judged by caucus unity? Caucus is pretty united right now. Or is it going to be judged by his leadership numbers in the polls over the summer? I think he's taken a hit on this. But I think we were in uncharted waters here too. As I said, I don't know of any other person who has had a break with a party with this much like explosive stuff.
Right.
You know, when Paul Martin left cabinet, for example, in the 2002, he didn't start saying what was going on at cabinet, right? And didn't say that Chrétien had done something wrong and he'd lost confidence in Chrétien, right? This is a very unusual departure. So rule books are being rewritten all over the place.
Yeah, just a thought that Susan mentioned the caucus is united. It's true because caucus decided for the Prime Minister to expel Jody Wilson-Raybould.
We want to get re-elected.
We want to get
united
re-elected. And the brand of the Prime Minister, I think, has taken a hit because of the revelations. But I'm not sure he did take a hit because of the so-called feminist agenda. I think the Prime Minister has done his share to promote women within his government. And as an observer, I think the Prime Minister does not deserve the criticism that he's gotten on expelling women, not being strong on his feminist agenda. The nominations that he's been making around, I think, proves otherwise.
Not that almost 50 young women turned their backs on him in the House today.
Yes, yeah.
That's got to be a signal of something out there.
Yeah, and I think it threw him a bit. I do think it threw it. It's funny. You could almost see today as the arguments for who is the biggest feminist on Parliament Hill. Is it Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott? Is it 338 young women in the? Is it Justin Trudeau? Is it Andrew Scheer? It was a big day. It was like a big boxing ring, pardon the analogy, in the House of Commons to see who could be the bigger feminist. And what I do think, to what Joel Denis is saying, is what you're picking up, what Trudeau is saying is what he's been hearing from the caucus. What has really got under the skins of women, especially, I think, in the Liberal caucus, is the portrayal of this government only having two strong women. That was it.
Yeah.
And once they're gone, he's no longer feminist. And that's why you heard Trudeau talking all day about other strong women ministers too, feminism has not left the Liberal caucus because they're gone.
I would say, on the basis of having covered Brian Mulroney, Jean Chrétien, I think Stephen Harper, obviously, I think even Paul Martin would all have shown the door to Miss Philpott and Miss Wilson-Raybould at this point.
So there are mixed feelings on that front from the people I've spoken to. Some people concerned that they will be turned further into martyrs of a cause, and some people, and we saw some of them publicly today, saying this is untenable. So I don't know what's the best way forward, but there is obviously pressure on him as a leader to
be a leader, yeah.
Well, to act proactively, yeah. Althea, what do you think is the next move that we might see here, or how they contain it?
I think he's made his views known, and it would be hard for him to backtrack on that and on this idea that the Liberal Party is a Big Tent party and we accept people with divergent views, and they've still committed to liberal ideals in the party. And, you know, they were tweeting about the budget, so one assumes that they like the budget. But I think that just in terms of cabinet caucus solidarity, his team, leadership of his team, and not appearing weak, frankly, he should let the caucus decide if they want these women in the team or not. What
do you think, Jason?
I mean, I think that it's probably best for him to do to make it a team decision. I think that would be certainly a good deference to his team. But this is somebody who's been very centralizing throughout his government, and I think he's aware that there's already been this sting about this. So many headlines about him being a fake feminist. What's he really done for reconciliation? Having turfed or having alienated and bullied his top Indigenous cabinet minister. So I think he and certainly a lot of caucus is wary of the political implications of ejecting people at this point.